Hi, my name is Zawadi Morris, and I am founder and publisher of the Brooklyn Reader. Welcome to Conversations in the Gallery at Richard Beavers Gallery here in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. This is the third in a series of 6 monthly intimate conversations highlighting the area's most amazing local artistic talent that has had an incredible impact, not only here in Brooklyn, but across the globe. Today, we are very honored to have a very special guest. Please join me in welcoming documentary photographer Jamel Shabazz.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I want a hug.
Nothing but love, sister.
So I'm so happy that you are joining us here today. This is an incredible moment for me because, well, let me start by talking to you a little bit about sharing with you some of my story and my intimate relationship with your photography. So I'm now about 2 decades in as a Brooklyn resident, so I definitely consider myself a Brooklynite,
okay.
But I was born and raised in Chicago. And, so at the time that I came to see your work, even before I knew who Jamel Shabazz was, even before I knew what your work was doing, you were my first introduction to Brooklyn. You were my first introduction to hip hop culture. And at the time I was a teenager, and at that time we're kind of figuring out our body image, who we are, our identity, all those things are really coming into play, and you helped me to understand who I was as a part of a community. You helped me to understand that we, even throughout our struggles, coming from street culture, street life, that we are special. You brought humanity to the images that you shared with us. We saw the joy, we saw the deprivation, we saw the love, we saw the community, all those things, they really kind of introduced me to myself. Wow. So it had an incredible impact, and here I am now, 20-something years later, and I'm sitting with you and the person that I didn't even know who really shaped and introduced me to Brooklyn. So I'm so happy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sister. That means a lot to me.
So I wanted to start by walk us through your journey. Let's understand who Jamel Shabazz is. What people, circumstances, events formed who you are today. We can start first with your childhood. I know that your father was your first teacher as a photographer.
Yes.
And then your time in Germany, you met your soon-to-be mentor, Phil Harris.
Yes.
And he helped to guide you for a while, and then you came back to Brooklyn and you spent some time at Rikers Island.
Yes.
So walk us through that journey of how you became Jamel the photographer.
Okay, well, it's very important to note, first of all, before I go on, I want to take this opportunity and thank Richard Beavers for creating this oasis in the heart of Brooklyn right here for the artists to come together. So I thank him. This is a wonderful institution that has provided platforms for so many artists, so I'm very grateful for meeting my brother on the path. But I was born and raised here in Brooklyn, New York, in Red Hook housing projects in 1960, so I am a child of the 1960s. It's that era that shaped and molded me to be the man in which I am. And as many of us know, the climate at that time was the Vietnam War and civil unrest in this country. So I was shaped by a lot of what was transpiring around me, and it's through the television that really fed my mind at that time. Unlike today, where we have so many different channels and social media, back then it was something about the TV and publications that helped me to see a world outside my community. My father was a professional photographer, and he had a vast library of books on photography. So as a young child, unbeknownst to him, I would look at these images to get a better understanding of the world around me. And so much of what I was seeing, in his books, I wasn't being taught in school. So I immediately started to gravitate towards photography, books, and publications. And it was something about that language of photography that really resonated with me. It helped me to better understand different things that were going on around the world, not only Vietnam and in America, but throughout the whole of the world itself. I was able to explore really with publications like National Geographic, Time Magazine, Life Magazine. Those books really fed my brain. So I was fortunate to have a mother and father, and I often speak about the balance in which they gave me. My mother was a nurse, and she taught me compassion and humility, and my father was a man of discipline. He was a military man, so he gave me structure and discipline. I grew up in a community where many of us had mothers and fathers. We all knew each other by our first names. It was a time before crack, and it was a very special moment during that time. Red Hook was a beautiful community. We had pools, we had an Olympic-sized stadium, we had a bakery out there that when you step outside your door, it was a fresh smell of cinnamon, Lawson's Bakery. And it was just a good time for me coming of age. You know, my parents sent me to private school because they felt I would get a better education. They were wrong, you know. But nevertheless, Catholic school gave me an outlook to another world because I went to a Catholic school in a predominantly white neighborhood, so it exposed me to people from Italy and Ireland. So my base broadened. But moving forward, but I have to go back to the book that really changed my life at about 9 years old. You know, I was a very curious child at that point. And my father had a book on the coffee table called Black and White America by a photographer by name of Leonard Freed. And it was something special about this book. Besides the books that he had in his library, this book sat on our coffee table and it was signed. It wasn't personalized or anything like that, it just had a signature in it. But when I opened up the book, it seemed like it was tailor-made for me. You know, here I'm a young man, I have never been taught anything about my history and culture, and now all of a sudden this gift is on the table called Black and White America. And I'm seeing racism unfold on television, but now I have a book that's really breaking it down to me on two different levels, photographically and through the writings in the book. And Leonard Freed was a very prominent photographer who, in his time in Germany, he saw American soldiers, black American soldiers, and it really baffled him that you had American soldiers protecting the rights of Germany and its people, but yet here in this country, they weren't getting freedom, justice, and equality. So he came home with the determination to document the black community. So in this book, Black in America, it came out in 1968, it shows black life in the North, in the northern cities such as, it introduced me to Harlem for the very first time through photographs. It introduced me to Angola State Prison. It introduced me to the segregated South. It was the first time I saw the Confederate flag in that sense. And in reading the book, it blew me away because inside the book, I was introduced to a whole new vocabulary that I was never taught in school. I saw the word nigger for the very first time. I remember being so compelled by this book, I would have the dictionary out with a pen and paper, just breaking down different words I didn't understand. So it was the word nigger, it was integration, segregation, lynching, rape. So this book, unbeknownst to my father, it just gave me a wealth of knowledge and it helped me understand, again, the universal language of photography. So I say at that stage in my life, the seed of photography was planted. I wasn't picking up the camera at that point, but my appreciation for images was there. And then I would go to the library often, which I found there's a great oasis that allowed me to go and just study more. And I would study magazines from around the world. There was a publication called French Match, which is the equivalent to Life magazine, but it was the French version. It was German Spiegel magazine. So I would look at these publications and see things from a different perspective. And I was just very inquisitive at that point. And it goes on and on. You know, as I transitioned into the 1970s, we eventually moved from Red Hook out to East Flatbush when my parents bought a home. And that just opened me up to a whole nother arena, another culture. At that time, East Flatbush was a predominantly Caribbean, it was a mix of African American and Caribbean, and mixed with the Hasidic Jewish community. So now I'm in a new environment, and now I'm a man-child in the promised land just searching for knowledge. And it was a very interesting time too, because I'm coming of age, I'm 15 years old, I'm searching. I think at that time, I existed in a state what we call triple darkness. You know, I was blind, deaf, and dumb to the knowledge of myself. And then it was people like Muhammad Ali that they kind of like start to show me a different direction and further motivated my studies to want to learn more about who I was as a person. And at that time, I embraced music greatly. Matter of fact, music played a very important role in my life, even in growing up in Red Hook. I think that the music was the food that nourished my soul. And seeing artists, when Soul Train came on, and even the Jackson 5 cartoon, it was something about those television programs that showed me the appreciation of music. So at that time, I picked up the bass guitar, and I wanted to be a bass player. And this just goes, I don't want to be too long with it, because I go on and on and on.
We
Am I going too fast?
No.
Okay, all right, because I just want to make it plain, but I don't want to be too long-winded. But it's so complicated to try to break down 50 years of my journey, but I try to do it the best I can. But, you know, I played the bass for a while. I went to the Apollo, I saw Kool and the Gang, and I was so moved by the way that they rolled. I wanted to use music as music became like, in a sense, a tool I wanted to do, in a sense, just to use my creativity. But I'll go back to being blind, deaf, and dumb. It's very important to understand that stage. Because when I moved out to East Flatbush, I'm in a different environment right now. And my parents divorced. Almost shortly after we moved into our house, they went through a divorce. And now we have a separation. That balance I once had is no longer there. So I drifted in a really bad way. And whatever reason, I found the camera. The camera became like a compass to me, and it helped put me back on track. And ironically, my mother, with my father being a photographer, my mother had her little basic camera. I would borrow that occasionally and shoot. But before I borrowed it, was very interesting to note, I was introduced to a brother in a gang, and he was a warlord of a gang called the Badass Stompers. And that was a division of the Jolly Stompers in the Crown Heights area. And through a friend, I went to his house, you know, just to meet his cousin. He always told me about his cousin. The Jolly Stompers was a very big gang at that time. And he told me that his cousin, Cornell, was one of the warlords of the division. Okay. And I'll never forget going to Rutland Plaza in East Flatbush, and I met this brother, Cornell. Cornell was about maybe 5, 7 years old, and he was a very intelligent individual, very, very serious. And at that time, his name was Sundance. And he had these photo albums of the Jolly Stompers, these big, thick albums like old telephone books. And it was these incredible photographs of the gang. And unlike our perception of gangs with cut-off jean jackets and fur collars and all that, what made the Jolly Stompers very unique at that time was they were very debonair brothers, and they wore quarter fills, 3/4 leathers, mock necks, shark skin pants. They were very clean. And I'll never forget looking at these photo albums, and I was intrigued by the beauty and the dignity of these men. Despite them being in the gang, it was something magnificent about the way they carried themselves. And at that point, I decided that I want to be a photographer, and I want to take pictures just like this. Now, I had seen photographs through Leonard Freed's work early on, but it was something about the community that really caught my eye, and I said I want to be a photographer. So I went home, and I snatched up my mother's camera, 110 Kodak Instamatic camera, and that started me on this path that I'm on right now. So it was that experience with that young brother, who I never had a chance to thank him for it because he eventually died, but it's through my experience in the home of a gang leader that really put me on this particular path that I've been on for so many years of my life.
So tell us, okay, so that was the seed. That's very interesting. It's a confluence that tells me that you were your language, your love language was really creativity, and it was very visual and it was musical. So tell us a little bit more about your time in Germany, because I know that during that time you began to see the effects of drugs.
Yes.
And how it decimated, you know, the community there. And then you met a man by the name of Phil, who kind of pulled you away from that lifestyle, kept you thinking on a very more disciplined path.
Yes.
Tell us about how that happened.
First, it's important to note that why I went into service and why a lot of us went into the military at that time, because I'm not sure what happened. It's not like Viagra was out, but a lot of our parents started to get divorced.
Okay.
You know, a whole lot. And then we became lost. And again, I drifted. Once my parents separated or divorced, I went astray. I stopped going to school. And I was just on a very destructive course. And a recruiter came up to my high school, Tillen at that time, and he approached us. And he spoke about the military as an option to get away and to make something of your life. And it was very inviting to me because most of my family was in the service. And I realized I wasn't going to school. You know, I was on a very negative path. And it's something about being in the service that kind of like gravitated towards me. So at 16 years old, I decided I was going to join. And I had to wait till my 17th birthday to actually go in. So on my 17th birthday, I decided to join, me and my partner, Lamel. And it was one of the best decisions I made. My father was totally against it. The war in Vietnam had just ended. There was still tension. As a military man himself, he knew of the conflict that existed at that time in the service in terms of racism and a host of other issues. But despite that, I felt I had to get away. You know, and, the blackout had just happened. There was a lot of turmoil in the city at that time during the summer of '77. But I decided that I needed to get away. So me and my partner decided to join, and I enlisted. My duty station took me to Fort Benning, Georgia. I went to infantry school. After infantry school, I was assigned to go to Germany. I knew a lot of history of Germany through my earlier studies, so I was very interested to go there to better understand what happened during World War I and World War II. So I went there with a very open mind to learn about the culture of the Aryan nation and just the history of the people. So I arrived, and it was a very interesting time when I got there, because again, the war in Vietnam had ended. There was still remnants of the Black Panther Party in Germany. A lot of the soldiers that were in the Panthers in the army were still there. The Ku Klux Klan were very heavy in the military at that time when I got there.
Oh, really?
So there's a whole mix, because what we need to understand about the service is that it's a mixture of people from all over America and some. So when you go in and you have this mix of people, you know, as soon as I got the basic training, I was introduced to racism like almost immediately.
Okay.
You know, so Germany was a very interesting place for me because it was the first time I was ever out of the country. And it was a very different environment. And I'll say that when I first got to my unit, it was almost like the Twilight Zone because drugs were so heavy at that time. I arrived, I believe, on a Friday night. It was a pay night. At that time, we got paid once a month. And how can I describe this here? Wow. It was just, when I got there, it was just, you go into a room, I'll never forget, we would listen to Steely Dan and Earth, Wind & Fire. I'm the new guy. And in the military, it's all based off where you're from. So once you come into a unit with people, we came with maybe about 6 other individuals. As soon as you come into the unit, the question is, where do you come from? So when you're from New York, they match you with different people. So they told me I have some homies in one of the rooms down the hallway. And when I went, to my surprise, you know, everybody was getting stimulated. You know, at that time, hash was a big thing. And it was surreal to be 17 years old and go into a world where you had just an abundance of just drugs. And it was just really a deep situation for me. And luckily for me, a few days later, I met this brother who happened to see me, and he just stopped me. And it was like he was an angel. And he said, "Brother, where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "Well, I'm from New York too." And he invited me to his room, and we immediately bonded. That was happened to be Phil Harris. And what was unique about him, he didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he was a martial artist, and he read. And he was from Staten Island. So he saved me at that point, because if I didn't meet Phil, I would have fell victim to that world. And at that time, a lot of young men were ODing off of heroin. But heroin was really big in Germany, hash and heroin. And I've always felt that the Russians and the Soviet bloc nations at that time, because it was a Cold War, I believe they flooded the American bases to destabilize the fighting spirit of the American soldier.
Yeah.
So heroin was very heavy amongst a lot of the troops there. If it wasn't heroin, it was alcohol, and it was everything in between. Assortment of just all type of drugs, because a lot of soldiers would go to Amsterdam, get drugs, bring them back to the base. So by me meeting Phil Harris, you know, this beautiful young man who changed my life, he was kind of thugged out, but he was in another unit, but he took me under the wing, and he taught me the importance of going to school and educating myself. He says, while you're here, you have to elevate. You know, you go to the library and just make something of yourself. And that really made a difference in my life, the 3 years in which I was there with him, because he was pretty much on a righteous path of deception of some of his aggressive ways. And we became very close. And he took a photography course, and he further helped me to understand the power of the 35mm camera. Prior to going to the military, I had my 110 Kodak, but Phil had a Canon, a Nikon, no, pardon me, it was a Pentax K1000. And he introduced me to the science of photography on that level.
Okay.
So that changed my life, and I returned back to the States this summer 1980 with a whole new vision now. But Germany gets more complicated. I don't even really want to go too fast past that, because what saved me was Harris, but it was also the music at that point. Okay. Unlike today where everyone has computers, being in the service at the time, what was very important for us to have was music. So I bought a lot of stereo equipment over there, and one of the main pieces I got was my reel-to-reel, and I made a lot of music, you know, a whole lot of reel-to-reel tapes. I was introduced to jazz, I was introduced to reggae. I became deep into consciousness. We had really good bookstores, and I was introduced to the Black Arts Movement, which is a very important part of my journey over there. And it was the first time ever hearing about the Black Arts Movement in that sense. And I got a book called We Speak as Young Liberators, and that book would change my life. It helped me to understand the role that the Black Arts Movement had in terms of our uplifting as a people. So in addition to the music, I listened to a lot of Gil Scott-Heron, Marvin Gaye, Confunction, just a lot of good quality music that fed my soul. And in my later days in Germany, I was introduced to a lot of reggae, and I got turned on to Steel Pulse and Bob Marley, and it helped to feed my consciousness. So by the time I came home during the summer 1980, I had grown tremendously from that individual that was living in a state of triple darkness and now having a great sense of consciousness. And one of the first things I did when I came home was I wanted to connect with the Black Arts Movement. And I did, and I had an opportunity to come to a place almost immediately called Urusasa, which is around here. And through Urusasa, the Southern Avenue Army, I was introduced to the poetry of Sonia Sanchez and Steel Post. and Gil Scott Heron, and that fed my soul, and it helped to give me a sense of direction when I came home, because now I'm leaving Germany with a heroin epidemic and drug epidemic, and I'm coming home to a new war now. And it's like I was getting word in Germany that a lot of young men were dying. They were dying at the hands of other young men, people I knew personally, some of my students. So I came home to a very troubling time, and it amazed me that all this violence was going on. So now I'm conscious, I'm getting involved in the Black Arts movement, and I have a camera now. And I realized that this camera is something very vital. And I didn't want to be without memories, so I carried my camera everywhere I went. And I moved in with my father, matter of fact. My parents were still divorced. My father had the house to himself. I moved in with him. He saw my interest in photography. He started to feed me. An enemy who became a friend gave me an enlarger, and that further enhanced my photography ability. And then my father started to guide me, help me to better understand how to use the camera. And one of the places I would go to reconnect with people was the local high school, which is Samuel J. Tilden at that time. And I went there with a desire to learn more about the violence that was going on, and at the same time trying to use my voice to bring about unity.
Okay. All right. So that leads me to my next question for you, and it informs me a lot, because one of the things that I realized as a photographer, you weren't in the 80s, the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. You weren't, you were young, but you were a man at that time. You had accumulated so many experiences. You had accumulated, so much wisdom by that time. And I think it's reflected through how you photographed people. And so much so that you understood, and we can look back now and we can really see that you understood that something was happening in the community, something really big. I don't know if you knew at the time that it was the confluence of music, the social conditions, and the graffiti and the dance that was coming together to emerge hip hop, but you saw it. And I think you saw it maybe in a way that many of us didn't see it until much later on. I mean, I look back now and you caught the essence of that. So, people, and that's because of your maturity and your wisdom, and that's incredible to me. So as a photographer today, many people don't know that you're still photographing and
Yes.
Vigorously photographing. I actually am your friend on IG, so I see all the photographs, but many people don't know that you're still photographing. And so what are you seeing now? What are you documenting now? What are you observing now in the 21st century that we may not yet recognize and we may not yet know about?
Well, one of the most important things I'm striving to record is honor and dignity amongst our people. I come to realize that I'm doing an important work, like so many other photographers, but my particular work is really about upliftment. It's always been that way.
Oh yeah.
Going back to when I
see
came
that.
home from the service, I realized that I have a voice, and the camera is my platform to use to engage people. And I'm troubled with today, and I can't really deal with today. I got to go back before I deal with the present time, because it's very important to help you. It's very important to shape what the 80s was when I came back home. Very important. I came home, there's just so much violence, and it amazed me because prior to going in the Army, I knew a lot of people from different areas, and it seems like that short time in which I was going, all this hatred came about and all this division amongst individuals. When Roots came out in 1977, January of 77, it's like gangs almost dissipated overnight, and people grew into a consciousness now. It's amazing. No one really talks about the impact that Roots had on our generation, but it changed people and it brought about a spirit of unity. And then when the blackout came, we went back again. And then during my time away, it's like I came home to a time now that the big gangs were going, but now they broke into crews. And now you got all these crews existing. You got the Cats, you got the Duats, you got the RRC, you got all these different crews now. And it was this hatred amongst each other, this inflicting pain upon one another. And that bothered me. And I was disturbed. It's like, I was disturbed to the point like, what happened to the men that once stood firm with a determination to make our community better? Because when we grew into consciousness, we had a sincere concern to change our community before I went in the military. Because Roots had that type of impact on us in addition to Ali and a lot of other things. It gave us a sense of pride and dignity and purpose. And when I came home, everybody seemed to have fallen victim. And I was bothered behind that and all this hatred. And it was the strangest thing because during the day, I would roll with a group of young brothers. I would reconnect on the avenue with certain individuals and have great relationships in terms of communications and tell them about my experience in Germany and introduce them to chess and jazz. and things of that nature, speaking about the importance of doing for self and having a sense of community. And then during the evening, I'll be with another crew of brothers that would be out. And unbeknownst to me, they were enemies to one another. And they were bitter enemies towards each other, to the point where we almost got in some conflict, because when I came home, brothers told me that his sister was raped, and he told me the individuals that did it, and we were going to enact justice. And I come to find out that the people that we were going to inflict justice on were people I with earlier that day. And I could not understand all this conflict. And then they told me this side of the story. It was a misunderstanding, but it was all this hatred, and I was neutral, and I knew so many people, but it's amazing when I look at my work to know that there's so many enemies upon each other, but I was the neutral one. So I could take photographs of a crew of brothers on the corner, and they all Pumas on, Adidas, and all looks pretty similar. And then later on, I shoot another crew, but they were enemies to each other and lived in almost in the same space. And that really bothered me, and it strengthened my motivation to try to see what I can do to end this conflict that was taking the lives of so many young people away in a way that we could never imagine. I knew killers and victims. I sometimes intervened in situations where a person's life could have been taken, because I knew this person personally, and I had to plead with my peers to say, we can't do this to them, because I know this brother. So I was very confused at that point to say, I got to get out there more. And again, it was the camera that allowed me to connect with people, because, you know, my work is beyond photography. It's more about forging relationships with young people. So when I went up to the schools with my camera, I used this as a magnet to talk to young people and say, excuse me, brother, my name is Jamel Shabazz. I just came home from the Army. I'm a photographer. Man, when I look at you, brother, I see greatness. Can I take a picture of you? Man, let me get the crew. So I'm building with you, but I'm trying to forge a relationship, to have a conversation with you about what was going on. So the camera was a tool that wheeled you in. And it was always about that throughout my life, because I felt something was going down. And at that time, I didn't know what it was. I saw what heroin did in Germany, but something was going on in the 80s. I could not place what it was, all the violence and things that were going on, all the division, but it was crack. Crack was on the horizon, and it was coming, and I knew something was happening, and it was crack. So then my mission changed. Even during that time, we have to go back to what I was ingesting. I studied what was going on in South Africa heavily at that time, you know, the war that was taking place. You know, I was studying a magazine called Soldier of Fortune. So I knew about Mandela and Steve Biko and what was happening in South Africa. I knew about the Klan, because back in the Army, the Klan, they thought a race war was going to happen in '84. So they used to say, they used to write in the bathroom and even chant, in 1984, the blacks would be no more. And then when Reagan was becoming president, I had studied politics, so I knew that Reagan had very conservative policies, and I had learned about his war on drugs, war on poor people when I was in Germany. So I came home with all the stuff that was developing, and I felt an urgency to use my voice to sound the alarm, to talk to young people and say, look, we got to stop killing each other. We got to bring back the love. And that's what I was trying to do. And the song that really reflects the time is Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel, The Message. That's what it was about for me. That song really was a feeling at that time. And then it would go on to the song Self-Destruction. We were headed towards self-destruction. And I was just trying to just use my voice to talk about that. And then, you know, by fate, in 1983, I became a correctional officer. And that, to me, was another path that I had to be on. You know, one thing that happens when you're in the military, that you are told to take all the civil service jobs upon coming home. So I applied for a number of jobs, you know, the post office, transit, a number of them, and corrections called me, and I decided that this was my destiny. I had studied the history of the Attica Rebellion while I was in Germany. I read the prison letters of George Jackson, so I understood mass incarceration and injustice. So I decided to take the job as correctional officer, because that will put me in a position to now reach my people, because that's where they were at.
You were at Rikers, correct?
Yes, I started at Rikers Island. So that was my destiny. So I spent 20 years in corrections, starting on Rikers Island, and that was a path I needed to be on. It was one of the most painful experiences of my entire life, to go into an environment where you have so many black and brown men confined and at war with themselves. So when I got to Rikers Island, there was a war going on between blacks and Hispanics. And it was very troubling. I worked in a place called ARDC with young people aged 16 to 20 years old. A very violent atmosphere. But I felt it was I had to be there. And in going there was so many people I knew from the street. And having friends that were arrested for crimes they didn't commit, I understood injustice. By having friends that were murdered by individuals I knew of people who were incarcerated for things they did in fact do. But my thing was to go in there and try to reach these young men, Because in looking at the life of Malcolm and looking how people's lives changed during incarceration, I knew that if I used my voice, I could make a difference inside it. And I went in there to do that. And it was a very, despite it being so negative and violent, I kept my faith, and I went there with a determined idea to help as many young people as I could, both inside and outside. When I got off from work, I would go right downtown Brooklyn, right in areas that were filled with a lot of people. And I would speak to young people and let them know, look, I just finished coming from right there. We got to be mindful because there's traps put in front of us, and we're not careful, we're going to fall victim. And when I got on the job, at the same time, crack hit. Almost simultaneously. Crack came out in '83, I became a correctional officer, and then came Scarface. And then it was never the same afterwards. So it just, my whole mission was to use my craft, my experience to just talk. That's what it's always been about. The camera has just been a tool to help guide me, but my mission has been the same since 1975. I was trying to save my people because I felt we were in trouble. And again, I got to go back to crack because we had crack, we had AIDS, and the 40 ounce was introduced at the same time. So all these things was happening. And then the music started to change. Because in the early days, it was a time of great consciousness and brotherly love. You know what I mean? The brothers was wearing kente cloth and, you know, and took great pride. And the sisters were very popular back then. And we want to write, even the artists like KRS-One, they were dropping signs about you must learn. So it's a really good time. We had black radio, we had black TV. It was a really good time. And then everything started to change gradually. And I saw it coming. And I was a witness because when crack hit, I started to see the casualties of war coming in the system firsthand. I'm seeing brothers that were once healthy, strong, good teachers, now victims of crack cocaine. You had both victims of using it and you had victims of those that were selling it. And I just saw a very troubling, painful time.
Well, moving back to today, have we recovered?
Oh, no. Now it's the post-crack, and I'm so pained behind what I see. And that's why I realized that I have to play a very proactive role because you know, a lot of the elders are passing on now, and they no longer have the strength that they once had. So I realized that my generation, the survivors of that crack epidemic, the survivors of Vietnam, we have to take a role right now. We have to be proactive in this struggle because what I'm seeing now, to me, a reflection of post-crack, and I mean this with all seriousness, is when you look at Maury Povich. You know what I mean? To me, when you see that, that's what crack did. Crack created that situation. Maury's been on for over 20 years now. So when the crack epidemic hit, it created these type of situations that you start seeing more and more on TV. People lost their morals, that they lost that moral compass, and they went astray in a really bad way because we didn't have that back in the days. We weren't calling our women bitches and hoes back then. And with all honesty, we wasn't calling ourselves niggas. You know, Richard Pryor at that time, you know, he had an album out called That Nigga's Crazy. And I was a little trouble behind it. It was a very interesting album. But Richard Pryor even changed. Because back in the days, you know, when we grew up, it was something special to call another brother a brother. You know what I mean? To call a sister, sister.
Yeah.
Some of us even dared to call ourselves gods. But now, you know, when we became niggas with the crack and our women became hoes and bitches, that troubled me. So when I look at what's going on in today, I'm very pained behind it, to be honest with you. And now since everyone has a cell phone camera, we are seeing stuff in real time that's even more troubling. We have been desensitized. The violence now. You see a fight, you don't break it up, you videotape it. That's troubling. You know what I mean? When I grew up back in the days in my community, we all had mothers and fathers, or we had guardians over us. But now there's a division. The old is against the young against the old, the light against the dark. The hatred's at an all-time high. We've lost black radio, so there's not a lot of information out there. We've lost recently TV One, which was a great program that fed the information. And now I think that we are being led astray. And it's very troubling to me. You know what I mean? What I photograph now, I photograph a combination of things. I don't shoot as much as I used to, but some of the things that I've shot is very painful. And I have to balance it out because I have to show that side too. And what I've seen is hard. But the honor and dignity now is very important because I look at my work as being visual medicine, and we need it. And my Instagram feed is a clear indication of that because I could post an image from back in the 80s that could create a certain type of emotion and make a person feel good and say, man, I miss those times. Yeah. I miss the love that we once had. I miss when sisters dressed that way. I miss when brothers dressed that way. So it's bringing back a memory. So I really feel now that with the universal language of photography and art, that as an artist, I have a responsibility to try to create images that provoke thought and action. And that's what I live for right now. It's not, I don't just post pictures to be posting it. Every photograph I post is a reason behind that, to help heal, to help bring about conversation, help a person feel good. Because if you look at certain feeds, you might wake up in the morning and look at some stuff that's very repulsive. You know, it could be a fight, something very foul. And we got to balance that stuff out because we're being desensitized. And it's just very troubling to me. All of it is troubling. And I have to be very honest. When I look at Basketball Wives and a lot of these programs where women are fighting each other, that troubles me. Because what's happening, the children are watching this. And in their mind, this is conflict resolution now. That this is what you do.
Absolutely.
So there has to be a balance. And I do believe that it's the art community, the artists, both musicians, poets, writers, we have to play a more active role to address this here because like what I saw in the 1980s with the crack epidemic, I'm seeing something even worse right now. And it's beyond what we could ever imagine because with the president in power right now, with the laws that are being changed, this thing's gonna be turned up. Yes. Already I'm looking at the impact of mass incarceration, what that has done. Crack cocaine created mass incarceration. Now you have thousands upon thousands of men who have been incarcerated under those laws who are now coming home to nothing. You know what I mean? And so much is happening right now. So I'm really troubled. I can't tell you that there's any really sense of joy. The only joy I feel now is being here now and having an opportunity to have these conversations. Because when I was in Germany, what I look back on, we didn't have the chance to talk. And perhaps if we did have conversations, we might have been able to change the thinking of a person. We just had an opportunity to communicate with each other. So platforms of this nature are very vital for me to engage people in conversations about my journey in hopes that it might shed light.
Absolutely. So we're live right now on Facebook, and that brings me to the digital. What do you think, what sort of impact do you think that us living now in a digital age has had on our relationship to photography? I mean, there's a lot of great things that we can say about the advancements in technology, but you know, the use of our mobile phones, you know, we've got the social media sites. You engage in social media as well. Do you think that now with the proliferation of digital communications that it has helped to improve our relationship? Now everyone has a camera. Everyone's documenting everything in real time, like you said. Do you think that that has served us positively, or do you think that that has been a disservice for us as far as our relationship to images and photography? I
think the beautiful thing about the camera today, the camera phone and technology is that everyone has the ability to create images right now. Everyone has the ability to feel the joy of creating something special. We have the ability to freeze moments in time. Right. And that's a gift. You know, back in the old days, you know, with the Kodak Instamatic camera, you know, you had 24 shots. You know, you hope that you got it right. Today, you have a digital camera, you can look at the screen and you can erase it. So everyone's a photographer, everyone has the ability to be a photographer right now, which I think is great. So we all can contribute in our own way to preserving history and culture, and I think that's a very beautiful thing. I find Instagram very beautiful because you have a chance to see the beauty too. There's negativity, but I'm seeing a lot of joy. Depending upon who you follow, I'm seeing really good images and people who are trying to use their voice, use social media to address different issues. And I appreciate that and I celebrate that. You know, but again, we have to balance that out right now. Let's use this technology to bring some good in this world. Let's use our phone to create images that show love and harmony. Right. Let's create videos that inspire love. It's easy to get in your bathroom and take a selfie of yourself and promote it. But I think that that's an indication that we need love. So through social media now, you can kind of like see the injuries. You can see the pain in individuals by what they post. And it allows you to kind of like communicate with them too and help to feed them. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Unlike back in the days, if I wanted to connect with people, I was just stand downtown Brooklyn and hope I'll run in front of people. We call it mind to take mind. You know, we see a particular person. Today on social media, I could connect with people right now. And I could keep it old school and say, yo, brother, I need to get, I could DM you and say, I mean, it's good to text, but brother, Holly, let's have a phone call conversation. And that's a good thing, we can connect. Even with Facebook right now, I'm reconnecting with so many very important people that I would never have had an opportunity to connect with before, other than going through a big phone book and trying to find people. But it's easy now, but it's how you use it. Exactly. Anyone who knows me on social media, I try to use that platform to address issues through my photography. In terms of through my Facebook page, I like to promote, share documentaries and music, even though I might play the same songs over and over again. It's my way of letting the universe know this is what I'm feeling right now. Perhaps if you hear this song by Harold Melvin and Blue Notes, Wake Up Everybody, it might inspire you and make you feel good. So I think that social media is good. The other side of it, I'm seeing the pain. I'm seeing the war, the atrocities, the poverty, the misery in real time too, but We have to have that at the same time.
Right.
But it motivates me, and I'm just glad that people are participating because I'm seeing a lot of good stuff out there too.
Okay. Can you share with us your Instagram handle?
Sure, just simply Jamel Shabazz. You see the guy with the camera, you know it's me. It's just cut and dry.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So there's another something quite special about you that I think most people don't know. Those who are close to you, I'm sure know, but you've mentored a dozen photographers. You're a teacher now. You teaching artists, and today they're doing extremely well. You've allowed them to shadow you in the street, and you've really sparked a light in a lot of photographers today. Another thing is that you do a lot of philanthropic work. You're a philanthropist, and a lot of people don't know that. You've helped even Richard Beavers of Richard Beavers Gallery. He shared with me that when he first opened, you gave him a $1,000 check to help his gallery thrive. You donated some photographs for a mini documentary to fundraise, and even when his fundraiser didn't go quite as well as he wanted, you wrote him a check for $5,000 to make up for it, which is just incredible. So you're not just about photographing people, you're about supporting people, supporting humanity, seeing us thrive, following them, knowing their names and knowing their stories. In fact, I don't know if he's here, but there's one person close to you that describes you as someone who is really on a campaign to show us how beautiful we are. He's like, he's not a photographer, he's more than a photographer. He's trying to bring what's inward, outward in terms of our beauty. So that happens to be, and then the camera actually happens just to be your platform and your medium. So I just wanted to take the moment to thank you for that, thank you for the history that you are creating. In keeping with that, I had the opportunity to talk with another brother who you happened to catch across 3 decades of his life, beginning when he was a teenager. Here's how he describes you. Jamel was a mentor to me. He was the first male figure that I looked up to. He introduced me to health food, took me downtown Brooklyn to the health food store, showed me different ways to eat. He taught me how to be humble, he said. I was always swift with my verbal, but Jamel taught me how to build Zen energy. He was always a calming factor in my life. That brother Dupree, I believe, is he here? Is Dupree?
That's him right there. You my brother from love. Come on.
Love you too.
Love you, bro. Appreciate you so much. I mean, I watched this young man grow up as a young father, and he graces the pages of so many of my books. He's a brilliant young man, concerned in the community. He's been since day one. And my work has always been about young brothers like him.
Yeah.
And I met him downtown Brooklyn in the early 80s, and he just had a good heart. And again, my mission was to try to inspire as many young people as I could, just sharing with them the basic things that I had. I didn't have much. I learned how to play chess. I learned a little bit of photography, music. I became a vegetarian early on, so I was trying to inspire a lot of young men how to eat, young men and women alike, how to eat to live. And Dupree was a prime example of that young brother who will go on to be a magnificent young man doing great things. You know, so I'm so honored that he's here, and I thank you for sharing those words with me.
Yes, absolutely. I spoke to quite a few people about you, to ask about you, and it was always the same message. But I wanted to take a moment to look at some photos. Like I said, you still have the photos of him capturing you in your teens, 20s, 30s. Absolutely. And this is one of the first ones you might recognize. This is of Dupree. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you were at mentally in your life, what was going on when he captured you, and how he approached you when he got that photo?
Well, I think you know, when you look back at how I met Jamel, you know, it's a little foggy, but once we met, you know, it literally is what he mentioned earlier with mind detect mind. Whenever we saw each other, we had already established a mutual respect and for each other. And I recall Jamel taking me at a very young age downtown Brooklyn to the health food store. He was the first man to introduce me to health food. And I looked up to him not merely because of his height and his, you know, it's just his presence.
Yeah.
With me, he always calmed me down because I was pretty, you know, swift. And he always had a calming demeanor, and he always invoked wisdom. And we connected. He's my big brother, you know, and I owe so much of the way I carry myself, the way I articulate, and everything that I do that deals with high-mindedness to him.
Okay.
You know? And so in this picture here, yeah, I was definitely on my military field, as indicated by the green hood, and I'm standing in the square. And so that square, if you look up top, that's the square, that's 4 angles, so that's like 360. So at that time, as a young man, I was all about elevation of the mind, uplifting our people. I took an oath at about 12 years old as a poor righteous teacher that I would uplift my people. Like I took that to heart, and I would use my ability to speak and communicate as being a man of letters as he was. I was a guy, Edgar Allan Poe, Robert Frost. I knew all those poets. I wasn't introduced to the zeal, the black poets at that time, but I was always into words. And so with what I had, that's how I used to roll. Always in the square, always standing upright, and always ready to build on the day's events.
What year was that? Do you remember?
This had to be 85.
Okay.
Yeah, it had to be 84, 85.
Okay.
Approximately.
Okay.
We were young, but we were always men.
That's him again.
Yeah, that's him
That's
again
him.
on the
He
left.
was always a vibrant, always in the square series, one of my most iconic photographs.
In this picture was what I looked at this picture, and when you see the graffiti on the train, it's a whole bunch of static. You can see the times, right? But yet the brother next to me, Righteous Mathematics is his name. You notice where he's pointing to the brain. And again, I'm standing in my square. So this right here is a photo of Trooper Square, and we used to literally go on the trains and rescue people. We used to go on the train and speak knowledge, and we used to just go get people, say, come on, we gotta wake up.
Nice. What year was that?
That was this was in high school, so that had to be 84. Yeah, it had to be 84. I think that was like, I used to go, long story short, I used to go to John Dewey High School. I got in trouble and I got kicked out and ended up having to go all the way from Coney Island to Canarsie High School. And it was a long commute, but it was an adventure back then. So you would run into other brothers of the same mindset, and we would just build. So this, I believe this was like that L train, like Broadway Junction. That's where everybody used to gather after school and build and whatnot. So that's this shot.
You still have that jacket?
Nah, I can't wear that. No. The bomber leather. Wow.
Wow.
So this is, how old were you in this picture?
This picture, I still had hair. So, again, the bomber jacket, I think I was a little, it might have been a year earlier. And so this was taken out in Coney Island, Brooklyn, in C-Rise. And by, like he mentioned, back then you had crews in Coney Island. So, or crews everywhere. So you had like the Leave Alone crew, you had the crew from 23rd Street, and we lived in a gated community on 34th Street. We were surrounded by projects, but our parents were all working, like, we came from a middle class family. So in this picture, this is on the great lawn in front. And all the guys I used to, hang out with, they were like righteous brothers. So this picture, that's Andre next to me, who became Infinite. And that's on the left-hand side. And years later, he went through what he went through, and he went down south. He made a lot of money, and he ended up going to prison. And he was wrongfully convicted, and he did 20 years of a life sentence.
Wow.
In the wheelchair. And now, to tell you about this man, he was such a stand-up man. He could have came home probably in 3 years if he would have ratted, but he stood his ground. He was a man of honor, and he did his time. And he was pardoned by President Barack Obama. The case was shabby. It was a really shabby case. They didn't catch him doing anything violent. They didn't catch him with drugs. It was a conspiracy case, and he got caught up in that.
Wow.
And we are brothers.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible impact that we see. And Jamel, thank you for capturing that.
You're welcome.
So we're going to take a look at some of the photos. Jamel chose 10 photos that he wanted to talk about. What's that? So I'm going to give you a chance to kind of walk us through. This is the first one. What is this one called?
Yeah, this photograph right here, wow. I don't really know the name of it, but it represents, I guess, alive with pleasure, with a question mark.
That's ironic.
With a question mark. But this is a photograph of my first housing area in C-74 ARTC. My very first house is 4 upper. It was a very violent building. Within the 4 building, you have 4 lower, 4 main, 4 upper. It was what you call a Bing release house. This particular area is a housing area where individuals that were in the Bing or penal segregation, they come back and you have to readjust them back into normal jail society. So I was given this housing area with my partner, and I realized, again, during this time period, there's a lot of violence between blacks and Hispanics. There's a division inside the jail, and it really bothered me to see so much hatred. Coming from a community where we were together as one in Red Hook, now in jail, there's a division. And I realized that I have to do something. You know, at first when I started in Rikers Island, I did a rotation shift called the wheel, where you just rotate. You do 4 days of 73s, 4 days, 2 days off, 4 days of 311, 4 days of midnight tours. I did that for a while, and then I realized I needed a steady housing area. And one of the wardens approached me, and she offered me an opportunity to have a steady area, and she allowed me to pick an officer. And I felt that in order to produce balance, I needed to work with a Hispanic officer. So I selected an officer, Santana, and we had this particular housing area, and we ran it for a while. So this photograph has a lot of science in it, because the telephone is a lifeline of communication. It's everything in jail. So here you have a young man who was what I call my suicide aide, and his job was to make sure that no one hung themselves, because the pressure of jail can lead you to kill yourself. So you needed to hire people other than officers that could monitor their peers. So he's on the phone talking, and in the background you have a young man that you could barely see, and he's less powerful in the house, and he's washing underwear. So it deals with, you know, the policies of the housing area. That's taken from my bubble, my window, my little booth. It's a very interesting atmosphere. You have 60 inmates, 2 officers, 30 on the east side. And my goal is to try to educate these young brothers and give them guidance. I took great pride in going to work every day. You know, I met a lot of men. My particular house was pretty much a Brooklyn house. You had a lot of people from Coney Island, Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, Fort Greene, Red Hook. And I use this as an opportunity to engage them in conversation, to help elevate them, to help them understand the importance of atonement, forgiveness, to reflect on their lives. And I often told them, just because you're here, it doesn't mean that it's over for you, brother. You got to elevate. It's like a 15-round fight. You might have got knocked out the first 5 rounds, but it's not over for you. You got to elevate yourself, and you got to think, you know. And I look forward to going to work every day. Very violent housing area, but I was able to maintain it for a long time and produced a lot of really good seeds, you know, from that experience.
Okay.
So that's part of a series actually called Island of Bars.
Okay.
This photograph represents me really coming home from the Army. It's one of the very first photographs in which I made. It's on Church and Flatbush Avenue. It's called A Time of Innocence. This is a moment in which, in a sense, the children are going into a dark cloud that will become crack. So it's that moment in which it's a very peaceful time. It's a very different style of my traditional photography of the close-up portrait. This is more my documentary style. And it's a very special photograph to me because it was still a good time. It represents this particular avenue I crossed so many times. Just going up and down Church Avenue, you know, using that experience to just engage people, to reconnect.
What year was that?
This is 1980 right here. This is a very important photograph here because it's actually where I come from. I took this picture back in 1997, and it really represents me in my project of Red Hook. You know, this is actually an Old Timers Day festival, and like an angel, this young boy appeared to me. I mean, it's packed out there. It's an Old Timers Day festival, and there's hundreds upon hundreds of people. You would never know. For whatever reason, my eye was drawn to this young man. I followed him for a moment, and to my shock, he stood by that sign. I wish it could have been in color because you could see the Marcus Garvey flag on the left, red, black, and green, but he stopped there, and it said, "No standing any time." And what this means to me, it represents my age of curiosity coming up in that project. Crossing that street, Columbia Street, on so many different times, Lorraine Street, and just exploring. So it just represents a pause. And this will be the cover of my next book, because it really just represents my journey. My father has so many pictures of me and my sister playing in that park back in the days. I live right across from that park. So it just represents the start of my journey and my curiosity. This is what I live for right here. And this is based off a dream. And it's very rare that I actually create images like this here. But I had a dream, and I thought about all the gang violence in America and how so much is based off color. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I said, I have to create something to make a statement. And for whoever, for the chess players in here, you can understand the science of this photograph.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
in order to play chess, you have to have pieces black or white or colors that are opposing each other. But
Right.
here,
Both
you know,
black.
what I want to create here is you got blood, you got crip, you have an untraditional chessboard, because normally a chessboard is black or white. I decided to use a chessboard that is red and black. And the red represents the blood that has been spilled. and the black squares represent the black lives that have been lost. This photograph is called What Now? And that's a question mark because now you have enemies confronting one another over a battlefield and neither one can move at this point. So this is my way of creating an image that speaks to the young gang members. You know, I have to speak, going back to the language of photography, this is a language that anyone in the gang can identify with, and we can even deal with another gang because this could be Democrat and Republican, the red states, the blue states. You know, so colors have always played a role in certain activity. But for me personally, it also represents, it represents the war I deal with every single day, trying to save young men from killing each other. There was a point in our history where we were being killed for the color of our skin. Now we're being killed for the colors that we wear. And it's just very troubling to me to see this. So a lot of my work is geared towards trying to save these young men and help them to understand. And one of the things I've taught for many years in my life is chess. Because chess to me is conflict. It helps you to understand conflict and how to deal with conflict resolution.
Yes.
How to make the right decision, understanding sacrifice, understanding loss, understanding gain. So one of the things I did when I came home, every opportunity I got, I brought brothers into my home and I taught them how to play chess. Aside having my camera with me each day, I always had a camera bag with my chessboard in it. So this is one of my most important photographs right here.
What piece would you say that you are? I always say that I think I'm a knight by the way it moves.
Okay.
What piece would you say?
I
that
gotta
you are?
be the king. I gotta be the king. I mean, I like to
Great
make
answer.
a lot of moves, and he don't make a lot of moves, but I'm the king.
Okay. All right.
This is my community in Red Hook too, and this is when I first came home. And this is a very important photograph to me because it represents a time of innocence too. When I came home from the Army, I revisited this community, and I saw that dark cloud was hanging over this community heavy, real heavy. I came home angry because a lot of the brothers I grew up with, they weren't doing their job. I felt that they were very negligent in upholding what we were taught to do, and that was to save our people. And many of the brothers they went on to be drug dealers, and they devastate the community. It really bothered me because I went out there trying to sound the alarm. I still saw a lot of hope in the community. And I want to rally up the brothers and say, look, brother, we got to get together and bring back the love. And this represents that time period. And then shortly afterwards, the crack hit and Red Hook got tore up. You know, back in the early days, a school principal got killed looking for a young child, and it was considered one of the worst projects in the city. It's one of the largest, and it got hit hard by crack, and I lost so many good people. And it pains me when I think about the loss and the potential that we had, because it was, you know, it was a time in which we called it the Righteous Projects because there was a lot of really righteous people in the community wanting to uplift it. And then, you know, when I came home from the Army, all that was just lost, like it never even existed anymore. So I went out there often just trying to engage young people, try to save them. And sadly, when that crack hit, so many fell victim to it. This is a very important photograph of mine, and it's what I represent. And it's called We Must First Be Brothers. And I worked on an entire series of just brothers giving each other the handshake. The handshake always meant something special to us. And this represents brothers from two different tribes coming together in the spirit of unity. Despite their different political or cultural views, they're looking each other in the eye as men, and they're embracing each other. So it's a part of a very important a series of mine called We Must First Be Brothers. I live to that. It's a part of me every day. When I see brothers, I'm embracing it. And it's perfect it would come shortly after the brothers playing chess, because this is what I aspired to create. Because I was brought up with the idea of I want for my brothers, I want for myself. And we got to bring that back.
That one's powerful. It literally gave me chills just looking at it.
This is a very important family too, dealing with the level of brotherhood and us coming together as men. You know, and this is a photograph titled It Takes a Village. And it just represents a young man who's about to be married. He has his grooms with him, and he has his young child. And all of them represent pillars of the community. This is taken in North Philadelphia. So it's very important for me to show the other side of black men, because oftentimes we see the negative side. We see the crime, we see the so-called absentee father and all that. I want to show the honor and dignity right here. So this is one of my most important photographs as well, to show that men do care, men are fathers, they are providers and protectors.
What year was this?
This is probably like the early 1990s, about maybe 1997 or 94. I can't really recall with this one here. this is very important here too. Felipe Luciano is a mentor of mine, and he's a member of the Last Poets, a very magnificent man who I consider a role model to me. I have a great amount of love for him. And this is the photograph that was made at Medgar Evers College a few years ago. And I thought it was very incredible because you had this young brother who he just met, and they are coming together in the language of the drum. And it represents the bridging of the gap between old and young. And I thought it was a very important photograph because we need that right now. This is separation where that respect that elders once had is lost, and we have to bring it back in the tradition of the drum. And with the drum itself, over the many years, you know, the drum has saved me. If it wasn't for it, I don't know where I would be at right now. It's coming home from Rikers Island on those Sundays and going to Prospect Park, Drummers Grove, where I would go and I would rekindle my spirit, listen to the sound of the drum. So the drum has always played a very vital role in my healing process. And I found that in going to Prospect Park, not only on Sunday, but in general, it helped heal me. But it was something special about that drum and the language. So this photo, to me, this photograph represents passing on the torch to the next generation. And that's what I'm about right now, making sure that the younger generation is in alignment with the history of the past. Wow. This is one of my deepest photographs as well. And my subconscious mind led me to this young man in Harlem. And it's so deep here. You know, he's holding the paper, final call, Merchants of Death. And I saw the young man with the newspaper alone, and it was powerful to see this young man with a paper that speaks about merchants of death, dealing with alcohol, drug addiction, all the ills that are tearing apart our community. And this is taken on 125th Street in Lenox. And I saw this young man, and as I prepared my camera to take his image, I always look around, and I saw the gentleman devastated, you know, of addiction. And I thought it would help, bringing him into the photograph, the frame, would help to bring out the greater meaning of the image and help it give it greater understanding and pain, or should I say greater understanding. And what's interesting about this photograph here is the eyes of the young man. You see pain in his eyes. You see struggle with his own existence. There's a lot going on. But I felt the need to create images like this here to tell stories, to create this, to bring this into the jails, to bring this amongst young people, to let them see what's going on in our community, to have some degree of empathy. And so it's very important that I create images that provoke thought. You know, I don't like to take just fun images. I want images that make you think, may cause you to reflect, images that are timeless. And this happens to be one of them.
You said this was in Harlem?
This is in Harlem.
125th Street?
125th Street. And it's titled Merchants of Death. This is an image that really sparked me to action. This is another photograph I took when I first came home from the Army. And what's happening here is this young man, I met him at a train station actually. It's a Sutter Avenue train station. I'm about to get on the train. And whatever reason, he was drawn towards me. You know, and the look of just wanting, you know, and I don't know what it was, but he was just drawn to me. You see the pain in his eyes, and from the way he was dressed, he was going through struggle. And he reminded me so much of myself with my parents' divorce and the struggle that he's going through. And I call this photograph The Struggle Within. And it's only a train station now, and we are separated behind bars. But if you look at the background, you see a young man horseplaying, put another young man in a yoke. But it reminded me of the work that I have to do to save young people, because I've seen this face throughout my entire life. I've seen it in the street, I've seen it in the jail endless times. So this photograph stayed in my house. It's one of the prominent images in my living room, and it reminds me of my duty to teach young men and women that I have a responsibility to save him. And I would never see him again consciously. You know, subconsciously, we might have crossed each other's path. We might have even been in jail together. I don't know. Hopefully one day I will find out who this young man is. Hopefully he was able to elevate, but I don't know. But I've seen this played out over and over again, even to the point where I have nightmares about this photograph, because I felt I should have saved him. I took the photograph, we departed. I never got his name, and there's just nothing. So now it just serves as a reminder, and he lives within inside me.
Okay, there's a few more, but I'm going to move on. I want to talk a little bit about your books. You've got 8 books. I found out. I thought it was 5, but I found out tonight that you have 8 books.
Yes.
3 are self-published, correct?
2.
2, okay. And you're latest piece that you're most proud of, limited edition called Pieces of a Man.
Yes.
I looked through it because you gave it to me as a gift. Thank you very much. One of the things that I noticed is that you seem to really enjoy taking black and white photography, black and white photographs. But there are some color photographs in there too. What informs your decision to shoot in black and white versus color? Like, I get different feelings from the two, but when do you decide, okay, today I'm gonna shoot black and white for what reason? Or today I'm gonna take the color camera because I want to capture what?
It's kind of hard to say, to be honest with you. Early on in the 1980s, when I was developing, I shot a lot of black and white because I was developing my own film and prints. So I did a lot of it back then because it was very inexpensive. The color is just, sometimes it's a feeling. Like if I go to Prosper Park in Drummers Grove and I want to get that energy and the color, and you know, I want to capture the vibrancy, you know, the color film works. But it's really hard to say. In most cases today, and even for the past 20 years, I carry two cameras with me. One with black and white film, one with color film. And it's just all about a feeling. There's certain images I shot in both black and white and color. But it's really based on a feeling at that time. And it's so hard to say. Sometimes if it's an overcast, I say, you know what, this is a perfect day for black and white film. Or I might decide I want to travel the trains and shoot an available light. And I think the black and white film would be conducive for that. So it's always a feeling. And sometimes it's just a gamble, and it tends to work. Like with this photograph here, it can go either way. The beautiful thing about color, I can always convert it to black and white. But again, it's purely just a feeling and a coincidence.
Okay, so your book, Pieces of a Man?
Yes.
Why, this is your latest piece, why Pieces of a Man? And talk about it a little bit. Why is this special to you, and why is it limited edition?
Okay, Pieces of a Man is really my tribute to Gil Scott-Heron. He did a song called Pieces of a Man about an individual that found out he got laid off and he went into a deep depression, and it just talked about that whole vibration. Reminded me of my father, you know, and his struggle with alcoholism. And Gil Scott-Heron always spoke to my soul, and around this time Gil had died, and I had a personal relationship with Gil because he got locked up, you know, and I had him under my custody for a few.
Wow.
His music saved me over the many, many years of my life. It educated me, it informed me on so many different levels. So I want to give a tribute to Gil Scott-Heron. So this book is actually a tribute to him, and also so many people that touched my life. Because when I do books, it's my way of just sharing my work with the universe and saying, because I believe that my work belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to me. I do these books not for financial gain. I do it to make sure that our history and culture is preserved. You know, and with the idea of Pieces of a Man, every photograph represents a piece of my life. You know, my other book is called Seconds of My Life. Now, Pieces of a Man, it represents different people I met throughout my travels and experience in which I had. And every photograph is almost like a piece of a puzzle of my life and journey. I decided to use this particular cover because this cover represents my interaction with young people on the street. Here you have two men on a bus in East Flatbush, and they're looking at my photo album. And what I often did, I always carry work with me. And my objective was to use the work as a form of bait, because I looked at myself as a fisherman. And the images became bait. The portfolio was a bait to draw them in. And as they're looking at some of the photographs that you've seen, it sparks conversation and develops a relationship between myself and the subject matter. So here you have a situation where these two young men that I know, Majestic and Hook, are looking at my work, and I'm engaging in conversation. I'm developing a friendship with them. And that's what it was about. So I wanted this photograph to be shown to show my love for my young brothers, because a lot of the work that I was doing was geared towards the young men. I felt if I can get the young men on point, they can go after the women. They can go after the little sisters. They can help the mothers.
Yeah.
You know, so my objective was to get the men. And photography was that magnet that I used to draw them in and engage them in conversation and photograph them and make them feel good. I never wanted anything in return. The most you can get me back then was maybe get me a pound of bananas and a quart of orange juice, and we could sit in the park and we could break bread over. We could sit and we could share them and have a conversation. I never wanted anything other return other than really friendship, and for you to help me do the work that needs to be done to elevate our community.
Okay.
So Pieces of a Man is a combination of images that go back from really my start. And one of the most important photographs in here, and even with, I want to open up with a statement by Yasin Bey that we know as his Most Def. And it's a statement which is so important that this introduces the book. And it clearly states, I ain't no perfect man. I'm just trying to do the best I can with what it is I have. And that's me. Umi Says, to me, is a song of my life. That's my national anthem. That's what I feel each and every day. But it's that verse. that I ain't a perfect man. I'm just trying to do the best I can with the gift that was given to me. To have an ability to see is a divine gift. I'm so grateful each and every day for the ancestors, for giving me the ability to see. And now I have an obligation to use this vision to make a difference in the world. So this is what this book is about. I start off with a child being born.
Wow.
After that statement, a young child, sadly, who's incarcerated right now. You know, so I was fortunate to witness the birth of a young man.
Wow.
You know, one of my most compelling images. And to know now, all these years later, this young man is incarcerated. You know, so I witnessed life, and now to know the journey of this young man. So I wanted to open up to introduce life. And in a sense, it's a diary of my journey, because all of my work is really, in a sense, a diary. So I wanted to tell the story in it. It got lost somewhere down the line, but nevertheless, it's a lot of power in here. And there's another image that represents what I'm about here. And I grew up looking at Life magazine. 1968 was a very deep year in America. Pardon me, 67. And here you have the climate of America. And this is what I was seeing as a young child. You have a young child, John Bass, shot in the street of Newark, New Jersey by the police. And then you have a soldier in Vietnam doing one of the major battles. So I'm witnessing civil unrest in America, and I'm witnessing a war in Vietnam. I'm trying to make sense of it. So I want to introduce this photograph that I took in the 1990s to help people better understand what it is I was seeing during that time and how these images shaped me to be the man I am. So it has a lot in this book.
Okay, is a narrative accompanying the images
Yes,
in there?
it is.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but I wanted to find out, what is one of your greatest accomplishments that you want to share with us? What do you think in all the work that you've done so much in terms of just really sharing our humanity with us? What do you feel is one of your greatest accomplishments? What are you most proud of?
I mean, besides being married for 25 years, I mean, I would say that's one of my greatest accomplishments right now. And then maybe if I touch the life of somebody, if I meet a young person who says that because of my work, he's a photographer, that's in a sense an accomplishment. But I don't think I accomplished anything at this time. I'm still on the path, you know, trying to figure this thing out. But to be married, to have a daughter that graduated with her master's from college, I mean, that's an accomplishment. But I have a lot of work to do. Maybe you ask me 5 years from now.
So humble.
And I'm on the path. I got
You've
a lot
done
of
a
work.
lot, okay.
I got so much more to do.
So we're going to have a little fun.
Okay.
We're going to do a lightning round.
Okay.
You have 10 seconds to answer the question.
Wow.
I'm just going to ask you a few things, and don't take too long, just what's
Okay.
off the top of your dome. Okay, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Early bird or night owl?
Early.
Music or books?
Ooh. That's your question. I'll pass. That's the even right there. That's the even split.
Dress shoes or sneakers?
Come on.
Dress.
Marvel or DC?
Marvel. Through that one, it took me back a minute.
Superman or Batman?
Ali. Ali, I don't know. It was I like Superman. He's kind of, because that transformation, because I live a double consciousness, so I think
Okay.
that transformation is kind of interesting.
Okay, so Superman or Spider-Man?
Oh, girl. Ali again. You gotta make a comic out of it. I like Ali. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Netflix or the movies?
I have to say Netflix now.
Okay. The 70s or the 80s?
Ooh. I have to say the 70s.
Okay.
The 70s is a good time.
Okay, the 70s or the 90s?
70s.
Okay. Eddie Murphy or Richard Pryor?
Come on, girl. Why are you doing this to me for? Come on. Yeah, I heard Richard Pryor first. I'll go with Richard Pryor.
Okay. Patti LaBelle or Whitney Houston?
Come on. Why are you doing this to me? That's hard. Oh. That's hard. Whitney used to sing to me, too. You get good love. I like that one.
Okay.
She was talking to me with that one.
Prince or Michael Jackson?
I got to go with Michael Jackson.
Okay. Sesame Street or Electric Company?
Neither.
Biggie or Nas?
Come on, Nas. That's my G right there. That's a God.
Okay. Ebony or Jet?
Ebony.
Good Times or The Cosby Show?
Good times.
Pink Panther or Bugs Bunny?
Neither.
Los Angeles or Miami?
Ooh. I like me some Miami.
Okay.
That's kind of hard right there. That's another difficult one.
So name something most people don't know about you.
Wow. I used to play the bass.
Okay. 3 words your children would use to describe you.
Ooh. Wow, that's a hard one. Good people.
1 more word.
Wow. Dead serious. Oh, I can't even think. I'm stuttering. I have to pass on that one right now. I'll
Okay.
come back to that one.
The most interesting person you recently met.
Wow. So many people. You.
Oh.
Girl, you have a history. I'm impressed with you.
Okay, good
That's
answer. Who would you love to take to coffee? Take out to coffee.
Harry Belafonte.
Okay. And the final one, in the story of your life, who would you want to play you?
Mahershala Ali.
Okay. All right. Okay, so
Okay.
want to thank you for joining us today, sitting down, sharing with us so much. I learned so much about you that,
you very much.
I did a lot of research, but I learned so much more about you. And I feel like I've grown in the time that I've been here today. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you for everything. Thank you so much.